Hi everybody, Adam Steele here, and today we're going to answer the question, mix-wise at least, does Nickelback suck? Now that is a bit of a clickbait title, of course, because mix-wise, Nickelback sounds awesome. And have done for a long time, but their style of songs in terms of the sound, the mix, has changed over the years as kind of modern trends have changed. And so we're going to be taking a look at the latest single, San Quentin, which is an absolute world away from the last song we looked at on the Mix React show, which was Kashmir by Led Zeppelin. Polar opposite. That song had very little low end, lots of instrumentation going on. This is the other way round. This is a thick, full, meaty song with a relatively simple arrangement. So let's check it out. And if you've not seen the program before, we're using a few plugins and Reaper to break down exactly what's going on. I've downloaded the uncompressed 96 kilohertz 24-bit version of this song from Cubos, and I have bought that with the money that comes from the guys who support us on Patreon. So thank you, everybody. Patrons. We are using iZotope's Ozone 10 just to kind of sweep around some frequencies and play around with listening for different things. We're using Brainworks' BX Control to solo the mids, the sides, and maybe the left or right, depending on what the song is and whether we need to highlight a certain thing. And I'm using Adapter's Metric AB at the moment, which is a really good tool for showing you things like stereo phase and stereo image, dynamics, loudness, and getting actual numbers on how loud some of this stuff is, because this, for one, is going to get seriously loud. So, without further ado, we hit a play. That is very loud, very crunchy. I'm just going to quickly disable all the plugins and check that that's... Yeah, it's supposed to sound like that. It sounds quite heavily clipped, but I think the guitars have that almost as like a bit crushing effect. And that little guitar that's in there is a little lower down, but on the waveform it looks so much lower down because it's got no low end in there. It's been quite heavily filtered. But yeah, when this breaks in, it's the massive bass and kick. Let's get this. And typical Nickelback arrangement that goes straight in. That's had one bar round, I think. And that's it, you're in. So within 10 seconds, we're into the vocals. I'm just going to loop this little drum and bass bit quickly and look at the stereo EQ field before the guitars come in. You can see on Metric AB there that there was a big kind of scoop, big space left there for the guitars and for the vocals. And the bass itself is huge. There's the kick drum. That kick drum has been really tailored to this mix. It's going ba, 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 really quickly. And the low end's got a bit of a oof, 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 but not very long. And then the actual bass guitar is massive and is really kind of filling in that space. Let's take loop off and get to the vocals. Let's get this circus on down the road. We're taking bets about a tank and gas will go. Really clever arrangement here where it's going guitar, vocal, guitar, vocal, guitar. So where they occupy the same space, they don't crowd each other, at least in this bit. Circus on down the road. We're taking bets about a tank and gas will go. And much like when we did Queen's Somebody to Love, that's this has got a very definite kind of center, sides, center, sides. If I eliminate the sides very quickly, sorry, eliminate the mids, we should get no vocal apart from a little bit of reverb. And that bass is perfectly mono, which really helps it translate, which I can tell when I solo it because it disappears entirely. So the sides right now on the verse are guitars and a little bit of vocal reverb and maybe a little bit of tiny bit of hi-hat, and that's it. Whereas the mid only. Yeah, so the guitars and the vocal are completely in different places, which really helps. And then even when there's the tank of gas will go with the octave, I think that's in the middle as well. It might get wider at the chorus, but it hasn't done yet. Tank of gas will go. Call up your best friend, then call to mom. About to do some shit that you ain't seen before. There ain't no back door, there ain't no side. Notice the cheeky tambourine has come in on the top to fill it in, add some energy. There ain't no back door, there ain't no side. Location changes almost every other night. Last time we found it, can't remember. And the tambourine's mono as well. The tambourine's right down the middle, but in that super high frequency range. If I do the sides thing again, the tambourine's gone. Last time we found it, can't remember much. I thought I was a god until my lawyer woke me up and said I testify. And then there's not been a lot of super low end in the guitars, but maybe it's in here as an automation thing. My lawyer woke me up and said I testify. Because that is kind of providing a pulse. Where it's probably not in the guitars in the rest of the track because the bass guitar is carrying it and you don't want the two to get confused, but... My lawyer woke me up and said I testified that I was right out of my mind. Let the record show I did it off the rock and roll, screaming every night, playing... Interesting. Remember much, I thought I was testified that I was right out of my mind. Said I testified that I was... So there's a quick bit here where right at the start of the chorus that everything comes in a bit louder and then kind of automates down a little bit by the sound of it. I'm hearing the overheads go and kind of get a bit of a rise, and I do that quite a lot on the start of a chorus or something to give it more and then less again. But the vocal has an extra layer on top, which is stereo, which we can hear on the sides. So that kind of shouted vocal and extra sung vocal is kind of stereo affected and on top. I testify that I was right out of my mind. Let the record show I did it off the rock and roll, screaming every night, playing 20 by the life. So somebody please keep me the hell out of San Quentin. Out of San Quentin. And only there have I noticed that the chorus vocal is doubled where the verse one wasn't. I think they'll have used something like vocal line to really lock that double in so that it's super tight. Out of San Quentin. Just keep me out of San Quentin. Could somebody please keep me the hell out of San Quentin? And there's a cool little effect guitar here before verse 2 that's kind of stereo. There seems to be more delay on the vocal here as well, because you hear on down, down, down. We hit the town. Somebody told me we should burn it to the ground. Too many favors. There's that tambourine's come back now, so this feels like this must be a half verse. Too many favors. Too much to drink. Come 6 a.m. they had me back in Yeah, and they made it, they telegraphed the fact that that was going to be a half verse by bringing that tambourine back in sooner. So instead of it being, I think, 8 bars of verse 1, then another 8 bars with tambourine, this time it's 4 bars and 4 bars with tambourine before we come back in. So that's a very clever little production mix trick to be like, hey, ting ting, we're going back into the chorus.
At the click, I'm gonna testify that I was right out of my mind. Let the record show I did it off the rock and roll, screaming every night, playing 20 by the life. So can somebody by the
Yeah, so that tambourine is in the chorus as well, so it helps keep the energy up.
20 by the life. So can somebody please keep me the hell out of San Quentin? Me the hell out of San Quentin? Out of San Quentin.
And that tambourine does stop for a couple of beats on that drop there, so it keeps going. You'll hear a check a check a check a check a check.
Keep me the hell out of San Quentin. Out of San Quentin. Oh, just keep me out of San Quentin. Ooh, could somebody please keep me the hell out of San Quentin?
This is definitely, so this is big guitar solo territory, and it's kind of mono and in the vocal range right in the middle. Put the sides on, it's gone. Apart from a little bit of kind of chorusing I can hear, which sounds something like Sound Toys' micro shift might have been used, blended in a tiny bit to give it a bit more width, but not massively, so that it doesn't become just sat at the sides. What really interests me is the cymbals are so much lower down than that tambourine. It kind of follows the modern trend of the super dark, thick, bass-heavy mix. I'm not a big fan of, actually. I like to have a bit more cymbals in there. I know it makes for a less impactful mix, but it's much more of an even, balanced mix, which I like. And there we can hear another section with kind of the end of one solo and the start of kind of another being off in the stereo reverb field, just so that they're kind of out of the way of the main vocal and stuff. And we can hear the kick is really buff, which we can see from this waveform. We can see that the kick is so there and gone. I like that. It definitely means that it stays out of the way of the bass, which in this case is relatively kind of growly as a bass. I like this tone, but it's a little dark for me. But again, it's a good bass tone. It's very full. It's got loads going on in the kind of 100, 120 hertz region. There, that's 120 hertz. So as well as that kind of super low, like 60 and below, which is a region where the kick and the bass are kind of sharing, and the kick drum is having to kind of punch its way above. In that 120 region, the kick isn't really there, and the bass is just dominating. Which suggests to me that this is probably a mic'd up cab, because a lot of things like Ampeg 8x10s, when you push Ampeg SVTs, they do tend to saturate and kind of fill out that 100, 120 hertz area quite well. So it's probably quite a driven SVT amp, I would have thought, would give you exactly that kind of sound, because I'm not hearing a really gnarly top end, so I'm not hearing like a dark glass or even a Sans amp. I'm hearing what I think might be bass amp distortion, because it's quite dark and it fits this mix quite well. If it was me doing it, it probably would have more of a defined crunch on the top, but it wouldn't have to be all out like gent. It can be quite a generous kind of fullness without being overblown, but this works for them. So
Tough to find a goddamn alibi, wrong or right, it's tough to justify. Can't dismiss too many witnesses when insanity's the path.
interesting that this middle 8 vocal it's quite sat back, not as compressed. It's got lots of this delay stuff going on, and the second it comes back to the full kind of orchestration, I can hear that it's on a different channel. It's got a different effects kind of set up on the vocal because it's way more forward, way more mono, way more compressed. So hear the difference here between
Can't dismiss too many witnesses when insanity's the pattern. It don't matter what it is, I'm gonna testify that I was right out of my mind. Let the record show I did it off the rock and roll, screaming every night, playing 25 to life. So somebody please keep me the hell out of San Quentin. Out of San Quentin. Oh, just keep me out of San Quentin. Could somebody please keep me the hell out of San Quentin?
Let's quickly, before we finish, look at the volume of this as well, because the loudness is a lot. Let's.
Oh, just keep me out of San Quentin. Could somebody please keep me the hell out of San Quentin?
Yeah, it's kind of -6 dB LUFS, which for me is completely unnecessary. That's just kind of doing it because you can and trying to crunch it out of people's speakers as loudly as possible, which with streaming you don't really need to do. But it's kind of, we're at that high watermark of still some people chasing the loudness wars. I should probably search who did the mix on this. I think Chris Baseford is the guy who mixed the new Nickelback stuff. As far as I can tell, that seems to be the way. Yeah, not somebody I've heard of, but yeah. I mean, it's keeping up with the other modern rock stuff, guys like Zach Savini and people like that. It's just generally a style that I'm not like enthralled by, but that's my personal opinion. And there are, you know, many of these records being sold. It's been played on Spotify a lot, I'm sure, and it's a thing. So there you go. Hope you all enjoyed this, and a big thanks to our patrons on Patreon who helped to make videos like this possible, because we have to buy these songs and we don't get any ad revenue off YouTube for these videos. Subscribe if you haven't already, because a lot of people who watch these don't subscribe, and it really does help the channel out. And thank you everybody for watching. I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.